Today, AI is a scary thing.
Absolutely.
It's very, very interesting from a technical advancement point of view. It can also be really scary from a personal protection or a company protection point of view, because threat actors and bad guys can do bad things.
Welcome back to another informative episode of Inspiring Design, featuring some of the best minds speaking about the latest emerging technologies. Today, we're about to dive into yet another hot topic, one that's more important than ever before in today's world: cybersecurity. But before I introduce the amazing speakers today, I want to share a heartfelt thanks to the EdTech Group and Cyber Pathways for sponsoring this episode and being willing to share their amazing knowledge. So check out the show notes on how they can help you today. So first up, I have here with me Brendan Newell, General Manager of Cyber Pathways. Brendan is an experienced educator and dynamic education training professional who has been responsible leading a number of learning teams and developing programs spanning several technical domains. Some of them include electrical engineering, computing, integrated logistics, battle space management, and program management. So he's the right man for the job. Also, huge thanks to Brisbane Grammar School for allowing us to film this episode in their state-of-the-art STEAM precinct that you can see here. An amazing example of modern education. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Brendan, welcome to Inspiring Design. So before we get into it, one of the things I always want to know is the speaker's background. The listeners want to know what your background is, your story, where you come from. So tell us your story.
Thank you for having me here, first of all, Rashan. My story is pretty straightforward, actually. So at university, I studied physics, but I very quickly went into education and training. So I spent my career, immersed in universities, working in high schools as well, and also in the vet sector. And I now am the general manager for a training business called Cyber Pathways, where we focus on cybersecurity training for people both in business, and also we do a lot of work in schools as well.
Perfect. And I understand, from our own chats that you've taught overseas. You've had a pretty rich background. Tell us a little bit about the education context. And you were a teacher back then as well?
Yeah, I've done a lot of teaching and lecturing, as I said, in universities and schools and different elements of the sector.
Yep.
So yeah, spent some time working overseas and I've always maintained a very heavy focus on technology.
Yep.
So whether I've been using technology within the classes that I'm teaching, but a lot of the things that I have taught have been very technology related. And so
Perfect.
I find myself with all that experience culminating in running a business that's training cybersecurity, which
Absolutely.
is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and look, and that's why you're the man for the job and for people to hear from that context. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, tell us about Cyber Pathways. What do you guys do? What are the products and services? I know a lot from it, but hearing it from you is the important part.
Yeah, look, Cyber Pathways is one of the business units of the EdTech Group. And at Cyber Pathways, we very much focus on changing individuals' behaviour so that they improve what we call their cybersecurity posture. There's a lot of organisations that I talk about that will sell software products. There's a lot that will sell hardware to try and protect people in a cybersecurity context. We focus on the people part. So we look at good behaviours, good cybersecurity hygiene, we often use that term, to make sure that people are more aware of the dangers and therefore better able to protect themselves. So the products will start from everything from cyber risk audits with our clients that will often make a recommendation that they improve their cybersecurity training. We can build and implement awareness programs all the way through to upskilling an individual to become a cybersecurity analyst that can potentially work in a SOC or a cyber environment that we call a security operations centre.
Yeah, awesome. And these kinds of acronyms is the cool part, because it's a new area, it's really exciting, and it's so fast-paced growing. So let's get into the topic of cybersecurity. For the people who've never come across this term before, what exactly is cybersecurity?
Yeah, again, it's an interesting term. We hear it a lot these days, and it's generally a way in which we protect ourselves in a digital online environment. So anything we can do to protect whether it's identity, or we have another acronym for PII, which is personally identifiable information.
Yep.
So any way that we can protect that information. At Cyber Pathways, we know that most cyber attacks are actually the result of human error.
Yep.
So 92% of attacks will be the result of someone making a mistake, and whether that's leaving leaving a password on a post-it note stuck to their monitor, or whether it's them divulging it to someone else in a social engineering type context.
Yeah.
We focus on those behavioural elements because we know that if we change humans' behaviours, we improve the cybersecurity posture of an organisation.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the most toughest things to teach.
Yeah.
So how do you actually manage that? What's the starting point almost?
It's tricky, right? Because we're humans and humans are lazy. So we do lots of lazy things like we use the same password in every different account that we've got.
Yes.
In a digital age, lots of us have hundreds of accounts.
Yep.
And I spend a lot of time raising the awareness of people. So we do everything from having a look at people's phones and devices that they use because they're often unaware of the dangers associated with these devices.
Right.
And we talk about what are the latest threats and how do we raise people's awareness and attention to what those threats look like, and then what do I do if that type of attack is something that I'm experiencing at a particular time.
Yeah, interesting. So how do you actually, like, I think all of us have been guilty at one point in our life where we put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as our password.
Yep.
So talking about passwords a little bit, what are your thought processes? Are there any tips and tricks that people should follow, just as a high level?
Yeah, look, there's a few things, and I always start from the perspective of understanding why. So, I mean, we always hear these days a passphrase is better than a password. So once you increase the number of characters and that, using different characters, letters, numbers, special characters, you increase the mathematical complexity of cracking a password. So we often say to people, don't use a password. And my favourite game is to try and guess people's passwords because it's often very easy. It'll be their daughter's name, date of birth with an exclamation, right?
Or the year that they're born in, or something like that.
Exactly. And social engineering is one of the big techniques that's used.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be high-end, sophisticated technology that's grabbing the data. It can be something very simple. And a lot of the attacks we see, they use a lot of psychological techniques to get the information.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they'll do things like establish a trusted entity. So in these days we hear about deep fakes, but they can impersonate someone that we trust.
Yep.
Now, whether that's someone in a business that's the manager or the boss, or whether it's someone in our family that we know and trust, they use a lot of techniques to impersonate those trusted entities to try and then ask us for something, whether it's money or information, to try and extract it out of us. So,
wow, interesting. And this is kind of, I think, the challenge that a lot of people have with this sector. We're almost used to now being hacked or having our information out in the world, and we can't do anything about it. What are your thoughts and tips and tricks that people can even follow if they've been part of a major hack? In 2024, prior to a few years ago, we've had this kind of context happen to big organizations. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's lots of tips and tricks that we recommend these days to people. Going back to the password idea, don't use the same password.
Of course.
We encourage people to change them regularly.
Yes.
And again, these things are often contrary to how we want to operate as a human. I want to try and have to remember as few passwords as possible, right? So I just keep reusing the same one.
Yeah.
We encourage people not to do that. On that point of passphrases that I talked about before, using a phrase is often easy to remember. I've got a story where I met a policeman once and I was telling him what we do at Cyber Pathways, and he said, I don't really get it. And I said, well, use a phrase as opposed to a specific word. And he said, I like watching movies. And I said, perfect. So you could use a line from a movie as your passphrase. Yeah, so he'll remember it. And it's something that's easy to remember, but again, bringing in that complexity, that more characters, and if we've got words, those more characters are easy to remember than trying to remember the specific letters one by one.
Yeah.
So passphrase is great. Another big tip is the password manager. So using password managers to store your multiple passwords. They can create secure passwords for you as well. And then you have a master password that, if not remembered, there's no other way to recover the password. So there's different measures in place there. So there are a few of the little things, and we know a lot of the whys, but I like to try and explain some of the, you do these things and understanding that underlying meaning, that's really going to help people remember that's really important, I need to do that.
100%. And I think these kinds of conversations is very important, hearing from professionals such as yourself. Then that awareness starts to build even in the general public.
Agreed,
and these practices, fall through. So talking specifically more cybersecurity, it's known as one of the leading emerging technologies in the world. But to bring cybersecurity into play, there are other technologies that form and work in the background of that. And you already mentioned AI. It's been a big issue, and sometimes the potential is also amazing. What are some of the key technologies working in the background in the world of cybersecurity?
So when we talk about AI and its relationship to cybersecurity, AI fits in a number of different places. Number one, we've talked about a lot of language, artificial intelligence tools that are out there. That's going to enable hackers to architect attacks better. They're going to be more articulate. They're going to be more convincing.
Yep.
It's really interesting. There's an absolute plethora of different techniques that are being used these days. I mean, to the point where I'm even hearing lately, people are seeing that there are spam or attacks that are coming to them in an email form that look like they're an attack.
Yep.
And they're done to look like a fake email on purpose.
Interesting.
And at the bottom there's a really big red button that says unsubscribe, and people think, oh, I know this.
Wow.
This is an attack, and I know what it looks like because I've got all these key flags that we often talk about.
Reverse psychology.
And so you click on the unsubscribe and the package is deployed that way.
Wow.
So it's all about awareness. It's all about a mindset and being very wary of all of these different elements and following through the appropriate response techniques.
Yeah, 100%.
It's fascinating.
And I'm assuming big data has a big play in this as well, because a lot of people use huge organizations and platforms such as, the Meta platforms and TikTok and whatnot. How does that relate with cybersecurity context and our data being out in the world?
So I always use the jigsaw puzzle analogy. It's not necessarily the release of a piece of data from one entity. It's the release of the data about you from that one entity and all of the others that could be stitched again to create a portfolio about you. Now, once someone's got all those pieces of the puzzle, it's a lot easier to impersonate you online, from having your date of birth, your address, your driver's license.
Yep.
All those bits of information go together to form that bigger picture of you and make it easy for them to impersonate. So how do we combat that? We change a bunch of stuff that we can change, like passwords, and we try and protect most of those bits of information. We saw in recent attacks where driver's licenses were leaked. New driver's licenses were issued by governments, because once that piece of the puzzle is out there, that's going to help the attackers make that big picture.
Absolutely. It's scary stuff almost,
Yeah,
like when you think about it, and an everyday person almost don't have the time to even think and action these types of things. So awesome work. And so when you're looking at future careers of this kind of career pathway and the skill sets required, in your opinion, what are the main skills that you look for a successful cybersecurity expert?
So I think this is an interesting question, because it's a moment in time question. There's students at the moment we're encouraging that one of the big pushes is that awareness piece. So what we've just been talking about, there's a very big need for individuals wanting to get into cybersecurity to have the ability to raise awareness. And so communication becomes very important.
Absolutely.
So it's not just the technical, the hard skills, the coding type skills that we're looking for. We're looking for individuals that can communicate to their workforces, to their families, to people in their community, what the dangers are, to raise that awareness. So people wanting to get into cybersecurity, that awareness piece is a very big push at the moment. The other piece that we're hearing at the moment is the response to cybersecurity incidents. How do we then develop skills to help people respond to incidents as they happen? The statistics change every day, but we're talking about some 100 days for an organisation to get back to where it was in terms of normal operations after attack, on top of the significant monetary losses that they'll often experience.
Of course.
So.
And actually, that reminded me of a recent, one of my close friends, he had a large sum deposited from an actual business transaction, and then immediately there was about roughly $8,000 that was deposited out straight away. Luckily, the banking agency was able to stop that, warn him, and recover that fund. But scary stuff, because he didn't even know where that was coming from. So it was a whole ordeal and a very stressful situation, especially if you're a small business. So when you're looking at the different types of pathways, what are some of the current, in 2024, existing careers that students can get into almost? What do they call? Like, I know ethical hacking is a good one, but I'll let you speak.
Yeah, so ethical hacking we'll touch on a second, but the first answer would be when you talk about facilities that we call SOCs, Security Operations Centres, not too dissimilar to this room that we're in at the moment. There's analysts in those rooms that are looking at systems that are collecting different types of information about networks and information flow and so on. So it's a very analytical skill set that an individual who's able to, and I think I've said it to you before, it's nearly a treasure hunt. They're able to look for that piece of information, which is then going to be, well, this is kind of the clue that leads us to what's happened in the attack, and then we can take the appropriate remediation activities. But there's really a large range of skill sets that we need in cybersecurity, from that awareness piece with a heavy leaning on communication. We obviously need people with heavy coding and technical skills who are able to work on those systems that we've mentioned before,
Absolutely.
but also the analytical skill sets.
Yeah.
On the ethical hacking side, a lot of the training that we do, we're teaching skills that you could define as hacking, but we frame them in such a way that we talk about the ethics behind how we behave as humans within society, and we apply that to cybersecurity, because the skills that we're teaching, we want to be used for good, and not to be used for bad in terms of committing cybercrime and cyber attacks.
Absolutely, and it's such an exciting thing. It's almost like you can do the same thing, but you're on two sides of the same sword almost. And all I can imagine is, people that would love puzzles would probably excel at these things, the detail orientation, and it is creative problem solving, which is something I love. What are your thoughts on how design thinking, critical thinking comes into play here, along with, of course, the technical skills?
You make a couple of really exciting and interesting points there. There's absolutely those people who like doing the puzzles that become really good analysts, because they're able to follow a process, and they're able to be very focused and patient and look at that process and try and determine what is happening in the landscape, and then make decisions and act accordingly. So there are a whole bunch of different attributes you've mentioned. Design thinking obviously has a huge level of application here, because that thinking differently, that working in a team to be creative to solve the problem, is very much what cybersecurity is all about. Sometimes the attack that's being launched is very subtle and it's hard to detect, but those people with those types of skills will be able to find the signs that indicate what's happened, and then they'll be able to take the steps to try and remediate the situation.
It's all of these stories are coming into my head, and one of the things that I almost got part of was I got a push notification, and this is when push notifications on phones wasn't really something that we had fully defined it, but it was the fact that my phone was supposedly hacked, and it said call a 1-300 number, and immediately I did, because it's an Apple context. And then the hilarious part was the conversation was always, hey, I need this information, I need this, I need this, which was odd, because a company like Apple already has that context set up. So what I did was I went, I'm going to talk to the actual humans. Let's go to the Apple store. And they went, we don't call you. We literally don't call you.
Correct.
So this is a scam. So immediately do this. Problem solved. So it's these kinds of like information and stories that raises awareness. So exciting field. With AI, I think a lot of this field is going to get more and more complicated. What are your thought processes on students studying this now? What kind of a landscape do you think they can expect in the next 10 years?
I probably would suggest it's the most changing landscape we've ever seen. So what those students are going to see in the future is actually really hard to determine, because as we look at machine learning, we look at AI, we're going to find that the advances in the field, both on the types of attacks being launched and also the types of defense that we can put up to try and combat these attacks, is going to really change quite a lot in the future. The skills that we have been talking about are what's going to be important.
Yeah.
So no matter what that landscape, those skills and individuals who can build up those skills are going to be the ones that are going to help us defend against those attacks. Even when AI comes on board and starts to, help those attackers launch more sophisticated attacks, hopefully it'll also help us defend against those attacks with better systems and better recognition of what an attack looks like and better responses overall.
Absolutely, and obviously it's a rarer skill set as well. So are there any predictions on earning capacities for students?
Oh, that's a tricky one. We're actually finding in the industry at the moment that cybersecurity analysts of different levels are getting paid very good salaries. We're talking, six-figure annual salaries.
Yeah.
So they're very well paid. And there's different areas of specialisation. So, for example, some of the students that I'm working with, they're really keen to look at the GRC element, so governance, risk and compliance. So there's those that have that type of interest and then can turn that interest to the cybersecurity field by looking at how do we set up frameworks and how do we govern, cybersecurity and information interactions around the world. So there really are a lot of areas, but they are in high demand.
Yep.
There's a very big skills shortage, and there's some very handsome salaries for those who've got the right skills to
I think that's the exciting part. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So looking at that exact context, what's your advice for students or even graduates? They might be in a tertiary level, they might be at home with their own business ideas, or they might be here in a place like this. What's your advice for the students?
I think the great thing about cybersecurity is that there is a place for all types of people. So I think it's about always understanding what it is that's your preference in terms of what you like to do, how you like to operate, and try and build those strengths, try and fill in the gaps as well, but build those strengths and look at how you can bring to bear those strengths within the cybersecurity field. So as I said, for some people it's GRC, it's policy and compliance management. For other people it's, into the coding, and for some it's, communication. How do I help raise the awareness of individuals and make them less vulnerable and increase that, what we call improve the overall cybersecurity posture.
Oh, awesome.
There's a spot for everyone, which is fantastic.
That's a good thing. And then sometimes people don't know that, and they think unless you're heavy with coding skills or something like that, it's actually not for me. So good to know. And hopefully the listeners and the teachers can actually pass that information on to the exciting future. So on that note, there's a whole array of words that come in the world of cybersecurity. One of the things that I really want to know is, what are some definitions? And if you don't mind, I'll throw some questions at you.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's test it. What's a phishing email?
So a phishing attack is interesting. I mean, I quite like the definitions of things. So I'll look up all of these things. So phishing is spelt with an FH.
Correct.
I'm sorry. It's with a PH, not
Yes.
an FH.
Yeah.
You said correct, so you weren't even listening to me.
I'm not the cyber expert.
So the PH comes from phone.
Right.
So we used to be getting scams that were coming through on telephones.
Yep.
And we know the term phishing is to go fishing to try and put some bait out and see if we can hook someone.
Yep.
So they combined them when these attacks were first happening on phones to call them phishing attacks. So a phishing attack is someone trying to get information out, and they'll often use a net, as you do in fishing, to try and catch as many fish as you possibly can. There's different variations of that these days. We'll talk about spear phishing. So spear phishing, a spear phishing attack, is when there's a specific target that someone's looking at. So it might be a specific organisation. So they might, for example, try and impersonate the CEO to try and target the employees of a specific business. So that would be a spear phishing attack. So there's different variations of that term.
No, fair enough. And then what exactly is a malware?
So mal is, again, I love these definitions. Mal is taken from the word malicious, and ware from the word software. So malicious software is condensed down into malware. And it's just some dangerous software that is either tried to be deployed on your computer either via an email or a USB or some type of method where someone's trying to get some software and put it on your computer to do some malicious things, and that might be just to take your information, track what it is that you're doing, but still some information about your habits, your behaviours and things that might be able to make you vulnerable to those attackers.
Interesting.
It's very interesting.
And these are the kinds of things I think that worry, and one of the common things that you hear is public Wi-Fi areas is not a good area, and if someone's actually connected within the same Wi-Fi network, that could be a very dangerous situation. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a little bit regretting that I didn't bring my briefcase, my spy-looking briefcase, because I've got lots of gadgets in it, and within that briefcase I have devices like that you can, so I can go and set up there's a product called a Wi-Fi Pineapple, and again, a lot of these products are very readily available on the internet, and I can get a Wi-Fi Pineapple, and I can set up a Wi-Fi Pineapple to look like a Wi-Fi network.
Right.
And if someone goes and finds a public Wi-Fi network that's unlocked, they could set up with a Wi-Fi Pineapple a Wi-Fi network that looks a lot like that one and encourage people to log onto it and steal their credentials. Some of those devices can do lots of things like push people off the network first, so if they are connected to a public network, and then hide the network they were trying to connect to, theirs will be stood up.
And it'll be the same name, wouldn't it, sometimes?
Yes, you can make the same name. Or sometimes you'll put an underscore instead of a dash, and you make subtle changes to make it look exactly like the real thing. So we encourage you not to connect to unsecured networks for that very reason. And I often, as I said, with my gadgets, show people how easy it is to try and really make them aware of, being a bit more safe in that regard.
For sure.
USB is the same thing, right? Don't put a USB from an unknown source. I mean, we have done USB drops for different clients to see who in their workforce will pick it up and put it in their computer, and the numbers are surprisingly high. And we usually put a little sticker on it to make it really enticing, right? To tell them this is some really saucy bit of information that you really want to find out about, to encourage them. And again, that's the psychological tricks that are played to try and make people fall for the traps. Look, some of the other things we often talk about are a sense of urgency. So if you want someone to react quickly, the end of the day is a great time for them to get an urgent message, say, quickly, can you please address this before you leave work today?
Yep.
And people,
So they're not thinking they're in that rush.
exactly. They'll rush and they're not going to think about what they're doing necessarily.
Wow.
So
Interesting. I feel like we can talk about this all day.
We could.
But what's the best way if they do want to reach out to you and learn more about this type of thing? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so Cyber Pathways, I love our business name because we do exactly what the name says.
Yes.
we help you find a pathway into cybersecurity. And we do that from, as I've said before, lots of different ways. So contact us via our website, so cyberpathways.com.au. Our phone number's on the web as well. But look us up, look me up, and feel free to get in touch and ask as many questions you like, and hopefully we can help put you on the right cyber pathway to a career that excites and energizes you to succeed in the area.
Love it. And on the back of every one of my episodes, I do like to ask a bit of a random question.
Yeah, go for it.
And this is a curveball, and I've been kind of trying to think what's the best way to do things here, but because it's a cybersecurity context, I'm going to frame it in that world. If you could have one wish for a cybersecurity friendly world for the future, what would be that world law in that context?
That's a really interesting one. I think I wish that the world was in a situation whereby there weren't individuals in the world who thought it was okay to take advantage of others by taking their money or their information. So for me, it's not so much the tools that are available, it's just more the behaviours of those trying to launch the attacks.
Absolutely.
I mean, unfortunately, cybercrime is, we believe it's the third biggest economy in the world behind the US and China in terms of dollar value. So it's a huge industry, and I wish it wasn't an industry, because I wish there weren't people out there trying to prey on individuals and take what isn't theirs, whether it be their information, whether it be their their bank account balances and so on.
For sure. There you go. Well, thank you so much for your time, mate. And I'm hoping that every one of the listeners, they heard your definitions and they'll go learn and research more about it and get in touch with you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Next up, our second speaker is none other than Adam Jacobs, Managing Director and CEO of EdTech Group, a national education and training organization specializing in digital technologies education. Together, the EdTech Group's industry-leading brands such as Junior Engineers, Audiry, and Cyber Pathways deliver world-class digital technology education to school communication softwares and cybersecurity education to support educational institutes, corporate organizations, parents, and students. Simply amazing work. So let's get straight into it. Adam, welcome to Inspiring Design as well. We just had a chat with Brendan, and there's another arm to this episode. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to learn your story. So can the listeners want to know always where the background of the story and the expertise? You've got a rich one. What's your story and background?
Sure. So my background is actually corporate finance investment banking. And I tell people it took me 5 years to realize that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Most people work it out much quicker than I did, so I don't know what that's saying about me. But, spent 5 years in corporate finance investment banking and gave me a skill set which I'll have for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But after I left corporate finance, I got into the business of education.
Yeah, cool.
And I've been in the business of education since.
Perfect.
So I joined a relatively unknown registered training organisation, an RTO. It focused on health and wellness. And so we grew the business from a relatively unknown RTO to the largest health and wellness RTO in Australia. Did that for 8 years. I was a CEO for the last 3 years. It was a fun journey, but then it was my time to do something for myself.
Absolutely.
So I got introduced to my business partner, with whom I'm still business partners, who was running a fledgling business. And that fledgling business was called Junior Engineers. Digital technologies education for kids.
Perfect.
Brilliant platform idea ready to be commercialized.
Yep.
So Junior Engineers has evolved into the EdTech Group. It remains as a subsidiary in the EdTech Group. And the EdTech Group is now a national education and training business specializing in digital technologies education.
Love it. And that was going to be my next question. What exactly do you do at the EdTech Group? So working with schools is your bread and butter. Do you work with the industry as well?
So the EdTech Group has a number of different verticals within it. And the way that we describe the verticals is really the product suite. So EdTech Group National Education and Training, focusing specifically on digital technologies education. So what does that mean? Coding, robotics, app development, design thinking, entrepreneurship, cybersecurity.
Yep.
So one of the verticals, junior engineers, mostly focuses on schools.
Perfect.
We support schools by providing online as well as in-person resources to either support teachers in the delivery of the digital technologies curriculum or to offer kids and parents co-curricular activities in STEM.
Yep.
Cyber Pathways, however, which is another vertical, as the name would suggest, it's cybersecurity education, primarily focuses on corporate organisations.
Perfect. There you go. And it's, I think, one of the most exciting things, and speaking with Brendan as well, this whole world of cybersecurity, there's so many moving parts to it. There are so many elements bringing together this fast, really rapid growing world that people don't always understand. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, what's your definition, or how would you explain cybersecurity?
Cybersecurity is the ability for an individual or an organisation to elevate the level of protection they have online. Cybersecurity is a spectrum, but everyone can have some sort of understanding of cybersecurity, regardless of whether you have zero exposure to the cybersecurity field, whether you're at any level in an organisation, child, parent, teacher, corporate employee, it doesn't matter. Everyone should have some understanding of cybersecurity and the importance of it.
Yeah, perfect. And one of the things that I always like to learn about whenever it's a new topic is it helps us to know where we want to go when we know where we're coming from.
Yeah.
So looking back, when you're looking at the world of cybersecurity, what did it look like, let's say in the last decade, maybe 20 years ago? Did it even exist? What did that look like then?
I mean, the thing about technology is it's changing so quickly. So if you were to say to me what it looked like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it typically reflects the current technological landscape. Let me talk about digital technologies and then I'll get into cyber.
Sure.
When we first were launching junior engineers in 2013, we'd go to schools and say, your kids should learn how to code. And schools would say, why the hell would my kids need to learn how to code? Fast forward to today, coding is in the digital technologies curriculum. It's super important. Cybersecurity is starting to get into the digital technologies curriculum. So, you know, where was it? I think, you know, cybersecurity has always existed. The problem is, with technology evolving, the risks are constantly increasing. There are new ways, smarter ways to defraud, to attack, to cause cyber damage. And really, I feel like only now individuals and corporate organisations are starting to understand not only the impact of these potential threats, but also the impact of not undertaking some form of education to either protect themselves or the organisation or school in which they work or operate.
Yeah, and I think it's the rule of thumb that I've heard is it takes roughly 100 days for an organization to apparently recover from a said particular attack, or you know, if they actually go through those things. And you know, these stories of money coming in and immediately being taken out of small businesses, that can be so damaging and almost sometimes can land them in such huge issues that they can't even sometimes recover from. So where you're coming from in the current landscape, so if it's been constantly changing, we're in 2024 right now, AI is obviously very much embedded into our world. What does that outlook look like from an industry perspective, and it currently looking at it at today? And my next question is going to be, what does the future look like?
I mean, if I had that crystal ball, I'd probably be sitting in a very different position, you know, to be able to forecast the future. In terms of sort of today's landscape and cybersecurity, I think today, first of all, let's talk about the actual cybersecurity industry in Australia. Right now, there's a reported between 18,000 and 25,000 person deficit in terms of qualified cybersecurity personnel and roles or organisations looking to place that qualified person.
Yeah.
The problem is that deficit is not shrinking. It's actually growing, which means there has to be more organisations like Cyber Pathways out there qualifying individuals. Now, in terms of today, the one thing I would note is in order to significantly improve your own cybersecurity protection or the cybersecurity posture of your organisation, there are a lot of accessible bits of education that you can undertake, which you couldn't do a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So, self-paced learning, culture and awareness training, just understanding the positives of things like password, what's the word I'm looking for? Password strength, all the way through to multi-factor authentication. These are things that might sound like different language to certain people, but it's really easy to understand. So I guess the point is today, there are a lot of providers, even online, who can access this type of information that can help secure individuals.
Yep.
For a corporate,
Yeah.
I think we are slowly starting to understand the need for corporate organisations to really take ownership of their cybersecurity posture, but we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Yeah, yeah. And where do you think it might be in the next, obviously this gap widening, if these kinds of problems aren't addressed in today's society, what's that world going to be?
I think the scary thing is the perpetrators, the threat actors, will always be one step ahead of those protecting. That's just the nature of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
But there are ways to mitigate your risk. Can I talk about where we are in the future? No, but I'll talk about the fact that, these cyber terrorists will always harness the latest technology to do wrong.
Yep, yep.
Today AI is a scary thing.
Absolutely.
It's very, very interesting from a technical advancement point of view. It can also be really scary from a personal protection or a company protection point of view, because threat actors and bad guys can do bad things.
And exactly playing to that attribute, what kind of thing is actually possible in 2024?
Okay, so I'll tell you a couple of stories that you will honestly think I'm making up.
No, go for it. That's the kind of thing that we want. I think even the listeners being aware of these things is the important thing.
I recently worked with a security operations provider who run their own SOC, which is a security operations center. So they're a SecOps provider. And they told me a story of a corporate organization whom we all know. I'll not mention them.
Fair enough.
Whose credit cards, they had a number of credit cards on file, and about $3 million worth of credit cards were stolen. That's not the scary part. That is scary. The scary part is how the hackers access that information. They found a link in the network between the network operating the elevators and then where the credit cards were kept. So essentially they came through the elevators to get that information. That's 2024.
Because of the facilities management being synced up with the digital information. Wow.
Yeah, just how it was structured. So there was obviously some form of connection, and you don't need to explain this using sophisticated technology. There was some form of link where somehow the hackers were able to link the two, but they came in through literally the elevator shaft digitally.
Wow.
And they stole that information.
Yep.
And another one that I'll tell you is, we deal with a lot of corporate organisations, one of whom unfortunately got hacked. And they went to law enforcement. I don't know if I should tell this. I'm not releasing names or anything like that.
Fair enough.
But I'm releasing some advice, right? And the advice was this from our law enforcement. We know these hackers. If they say they'll release your information because you don't pay, they will. But on the flip side, if you pay, they won't release your information, and it's likely to cost you far less paying the ransom than it is
control.
Trying to deal with the damage after the fact. That is our law enforcement giving that information, because the reality is they can't catch these guys.
Can I ask what kind of a ransom amount it was, like just to get frame of
Hundreds
mind?
of thousands.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and I mean, that's small, right? It can be millions.
True.
It can be millions. But
they must be doing that on a high frequency to many, many people.
there are organizations around the world that have board of directors, personnel. They're structured like a corporate organization, but their sole purpose is cyber attacks.
Wow.
Some of them are state-sponsored as well.
Yeah.
So look, I'm not trying to form a dismal view of the world and to say it's all doom and gloom. Not the case. But a lot of things that people thought, for example, it can't happen to me. No, it can.
Absolutely.
It can happen to you regardless of your financial position, regardless of your role in an organization, regardless of the size of your business.
Yep.
But there are ways to mitigate the risks.
Right, valuable advice, I think. And this is the important thing of understanding and being aware of hearing these stories does, even though it might be doom and gloom, it's very real things that exist in the world today. So knowing where these things can go, how they can actually work hand in hand, what are some of the skill sets that you look for future professionals in cybersecurity?
The ability to learn. A lot of these people are self-taught. You know, we were recently working or consulting with the Australian Federal Police. And they said something super interesting. They said they want to work with us to capture students who are in high school. Because you've got two ways you can go. These students are self-taught. They are completely immersed in the world of cyber. And if you harness their skill set, they can do really good things.
Yeah.
But if you don't capture them early,
Flip side.
it can completely go the wrong way, especially if they get the taste of, you know what, I can actually do this, which results in some sort of financial outcome, which results in some sort of kudos.
Yep.
You know, but what I've said there is really, if you're asking about the skill sets, the ability to learn, a real interest in the field, a dedication.
And they are digital natives as well. So
that's right.
So
And
it feels normal.
You know, I've got an 18-month-old who can now pick up my phone and navigate through it. I mean, that's scary.
Yeah.
And we try to have not that much, you know, phone time with my daughter. But digital natives, like, you know, what these young kids can do, it's really impressive, scary and impressive. And it's our job as the adults to harness that and facilitate the right pathways for them.
Yep. Yeah. And look, and on the interest of time, I would love to keep continuing to talk about this topic. It's something that I feel like could fill the whole day. What's your advice for students and graduates, or, you know, in that young age, currently in that digital natives context? What's your advice for them if this is of something interest to them?
Do some research on the providers out there. There's a lot of, you know, accessible information about providers who are reputable.
Yeah.
Make sure if you're going to do a qualification that it has some sort of hands-on learning component. So what I mean by that is has a cyber range built into the qualification, which is live fire exercises in a simulated environment. The best thing you can do is have as much hands-on learning over just theory to get you industry ready.
Perfect. And what's your advice for industries currently looking at this landscape?
As in corporate organizations?
Yeah.
Invest in cybersecurity protection, and that is at every level of the organization. Make sure every staff member, regardless of their position, whether they are a janitor, whether they're admin, whether they're in the C-suite, every single one of them should do some form of culture and awareness training. Just not knowing is one of the biggest threats, right? All the way through to, you know, part of maintaining your cybersecurity insurance is showing the insurers that you are doing ongoing training for your staff. Don't let that fall by the wayside, because if you get hit, they will call you out on it and you won't be insured. Invest in cybersecurity, be a leader in your business in that. And I'm telling you now, while it's one of these things that you don't know until you're impacted, you don't want to find out the hard way.
Correct. And I think when it comes to this world, ignorance is not an excuse anymore.
Ignorance is not bliss.
Yeah.
It's. I can tell you now, financially, it will cause heartache.
Fair enough. Now, that I think valuable advice all around. What's the best way to get in touch with you and learn about these things if anyone's interested?
Yeah, sure. So the best thing would be to visit our website, which is www.cyberpathways.com.au. As I said, Cyber Pathways is a subsidiary under the EdTech Group.
Yeah.
Or you can call us 1300 089 344.
Perfect. And last question, this is a little bit of a curveball. I've asked this from Brendan as well. He gave some interesting responses. If you could have one future law for a perfect cybersecurity world in the future, what would that be?
That every corporate organisation and school is mandated to undertake some form of cybersecurity education.
Love it. Perfect. Mate, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
That's it for today's episode. Now it's time to take action and build on the learnings to get inspired. First up, jump onto rashansenanayake.com/podcast and check out the show notes, links, and other relevant learning materials from this amazing episode. Next, if you learned something new today, click that subscribe button and set yourself up to receive live notifications on future episodes, as well as more opportunities to learn from our amazing guests, brands, and speakers. Last but not least, it's time to have your say. Join the conversation and share your thoughts and feedback on today's episode with a review, all while joining many others with a 5-star rating for Inspiring Design with Rashan Senanayake. Till next time.